Welcome, everyone. We have assembled a really comprehensive collection of sources today, and they detail a life that, well, it serves as a powerful and, frankly, a heartbreaking examination of early fame in America.
It does.
We are focusing on the story of Dana Plato, who was, for millions of people, the absolute picture of wholesome 1980s television as Kimberly Drummond on Diff'rent Strokes.
And this is an intensely sensitive topic, so our commitment here is to structure this material chronologically and, as impartially as we can.
Right.
We are not just recounting a biography, we're trying to analyze the profound chasm that existed between her very successful public persona and the intense private turmoil that followed. It eventually culminated in her death at just 34 years old in 1999. The goal is really to move beyond the headlines and understand the full trajectory of her life.
That's precisely our mission. The source material is so essential because it lets us track that transition from being this beloved teen idol of the late 70s and early 80s to a performer who was just besieged by severe addiction, crippling financial distress, and legal troubles that were, they were splashed across every national news outlet.
It's a textbook case.
It is a spectacular rise followed by a painful, very public collapse.
Right.
So to really understand that collapse, we have to first understand the foundation, which, according to all the sources, was built on this mixture of relentless ambition and a profound lack of preparation for reality.
Dana Plato was born Dana Michelle Strain on November 7, 1964, and she was the product of a teenage birth mother who felt she was unable to care for her.
And that biological history, it faded pretty quickly when she was adopted at 7 months old. This was June 1965. By Dean and Florine K. Plato.
Right, and her adoptive father, he owned a trucking company. She was raised in the San Fernando Valley. But even that adoptive structure was, fragile.
Oh.
Her parents divorced when she was only 3 years old, so that left her to be raised solely by her mother, Kay. And this early environment of sort of change and reliance on a single parent is just critical context.
And it's that relationship with her mother that really dictates the first chapter of her career. We have this very stark, very insightful quote from Plato herself during a 1995 appearance on the Marilyn Kagan show. She was unusually candid.
She was. She was speaking alongside her co-star, Todd Bridges, and she stated it very clearly. She said, "My mother made sure that I was normal. The only thing that she did, the mistake she made, was that she kept me in a plastic bubble, so I didn't learn about reality and life skills."
That statement right there.
How's that?
That is the key to unlocking the rest of this entire narrative.
It really is. It suggests an environment that was engineered for success and performance, but was catastrophically ill-equipped for navigating the real world.
It's more than just a passing quote. It feels like a self-diagnosis. Her mother's intention, as Plato explained it, was to stop her from becoming a prima donna, which is probably a common concern for parents of child stars.
Sure.
But the effect of this intense protection, this plastic bubble, it was twofold. You get incredible professional discipline, but it's coupled with this profound personal naivety.
And the professional discipline was undeniable. The sources, they paint a picture of relentless activity from a very, very young age. By the time she was 7, Dana Plato had already appeared in over 100 television commercials.
100 at 7 years old.
Yeah. Just think about the focus, the memory, the capacity to perform under direction that requires of a small child.
And it wasn't just acting. The sources really emphasize her commitment to figure skating. She was an accomplished athlete who trained with the specific goal of getting a spot on the Olympic team.
That kind of training schedule, it rivals professional acting demands. It really illustrates an inherent talent and a willingness to commit to these high-pressure, high-discipline performance arenas long before a sitcom ever came calling.
Exactly. The transition from intense athletic training to intense acting, it required the same level of focus. Her formal acting career, it started quickly. She made her television debut at the age of 10, appearing on the iconic ABC series The $6 Million Man in 1975.
And film followed right behind that. At age 13 in 1977, she made her film debut. It was an uncredited role, but it was in Exorcist II, The Heretic.
Okay.
She also starred as Evie Jo in the horror film Return to Boggy Creek that same year. And we should note, as the sources do, that both of those early films were pretty negatively received by critics. It just shows the unpredictable nature of Hollywood projects.
Sure, but she quickly stepped into a much higher profile project, the 1978 family comedy film California Suite.
Right, and this movie was a huge commercial success. It earned major critical recognition, including Oscar and Golden Globe wins for others in the cast.
So that gave her that that critical exposure.
It did. It positioned her perfectly for the next step.
And that next step was a direct result of just being seen. A producer spotted her during a brief appearance on The Gong Show, of all places, and that led directly to her casting as Kimberly Drummond on Diff'rent Strokes.
Yeah, and the sitcom, which debuted in 1978, it became an instant cultural phenomenon.
Oh, absolutely. She instantly became a household name, a defining teen idol of the era. For the first 4 years of that show's run, she was top billed.
And her work was celebrated. It resulted in a nomination for a Young Artist Award in 1983, recognizing her talent in the high-stakes world of network television.
So this period, from roughly 78 to 83, this represents the absolute apex of her public life.
It does. A young woman who had achieved massive fame, all built on years of intense, highly disciplined work, but all inside that protective plastic bubble she talked about.
So now we have to cross the threshold into the period where that private reality just completely shattered the public image. What the sources reveal is just astonishing. The turbulence didn't begin after Diff'rent Strokes ended. It was already festering during the height of her sitcom fame.
The contrast is it's jarring. While she was playing the perfect adopted sister on screen, the sources indicate that Dana Plato was already struggling deeply with substance abuse.
What kind of substances?
Her habits included alcohol, cannabis, and cocaine. And the fact that these struggles were happening simultaneously with her very demanding network television schedule, it speaks to incredible internal pressure, maybe a desperate coping mechanism.
And the detail that stands out most starkly is the timing of her first severe incident. She suffered an overdose of diazepam when she was only 14 years old.
14.
14. That's a staggering data point.
Yeah.
It confirms her internal struggle started almost as soon as the pressures of stardom hit, long before she was legally an adult. It completely undermines the narrative of the wholesome family comedy she was starring in.
And that event, which was likely concealed or minimized at the time, it really sets the stage for the major life decision she made in 1984.
Right. She married rock guitarist Lanny Lambert in April of that year.
And just a few months later, their only child, Tyler Edward Lambert, was born on July 2, 1984.
This pregnancy became the pivot point. It led directly to her dismissal from her starring role on Diff'rent Strokes.
Yeah, the producers were operating under a very strict set of, traditional conservative Hollywood rules at the time.
The image was paramount.
Exactly. The sources confirm that the producers felt her pregnancy and her emerging personal life struggles were just fundamentally incompatible with the show's wholesome family comedy brand.
So they just cut her.
The choice was made to remove her. They feared her adult choices would taint the carefully curated image of the series. It just highlights the harsh reality of being a product in Hollywood. Once your life interferes with the brand, the product is discarded.
But there's a vital human detail here. It comes from her co-star Conrad Bain, who played her adoptive father, Mr. Drummond.
Right.
In an interview, he offered this perspective on her mindset when she chose to get pregnant. He said she was enthusiastic, explicitly stating she believed she would never be alone again.
And that one quote, it provides such a profound and sympathetic window into her mindset.
It does. It suggests that despite all her success, fame had bred this deep, isolating loneliness.
So the act of having a child wasn't just a natural life progression. It was maybe a desperate attempt to anchor herself and find some kind of unconditional connection outside the highly transactional world of show business.
Though she was dismissed from her starring role, she did continue to appear recurringly on the show until it ended in 1986. And the final episode that featured her character, Kimberly, dealt with a really serious topic: bulimia.
And CBC News highlighted that performance, describing it as a series high point.
It's just tragically ironic, isn't it? Only when the series finally touched on the struggles and pressures that she herself was experiencing did she deliver some of her most acclaimed work.
And once Diff'rent Strokes ended, the difficulty of that transition became immediately apparent. The sources show she struggled tremendously to secure serious, meaningful acting roles.
Hollywood is just notoriously unforgiving to former child stars who try to transition into adult roles, especially if they carry any baggage.
Right. The plastic bubble had burst, and that lack of prepared life skills was quickly manifesting as professional stagnation.
So facing all these closed doors, she made a very deliberate, very physical pivot to shed the Kimberly Drummond persona.
And this began with breast implants and, most famously, modeling for a June 1989 Playboy pictorial.
That decision to appear in Playboy was a shocking, calculated attempt to redefine her image from the innocent teen sister to, adult sexuality.
It generated huge media attention, but it fundamentally changed the roles that were offered to her. It funneled her exclusively into B-movies and roles of an erotic nation. The perception of her acting capabilities shifted entirely. It often just reduced her to a sensational headline.
And her filmography of the 1990s reflects this completely. She appeared nude in films like Prime Suspect in 1989 and Compelling Evidence in 1995. She also starred in these low-budget direct-to-video features like Bikini Beach Race in 1992. The roles were clearly just an effort to keep working, regardless of the quality of the project.
And then we also see this cynical exploitation of her past fame in her 1998 softcore erotic drama. The film was titled Diff'rent Strokes, the story of Jack and Jill.
They changed the title on purpose.
They did. The sources confirmed the title was explicitly altered after filming to capitalize on the controversy and create a recognizable, if distasteful, link back to her sitcom history.
That was the ultimate sign of her struggle for relevance. Her past success was literally being used against her in her adult career.
Right. But amidst this dramatic professional descent, she also achieved a fascinating, if unconventional, form of technological pioneering.
This takes us away from traditional film and television for a moment.
That's right. Her role as Kelly Med in the 1992 video game Night Trap is historically significant. She became one of the first established celebrities to appear in a video game that used live actors.
Okay, so the game came out in 92, but when was it filmed?
The sources specify all the footage was actually shot way back in 1987. Rob Fulop, one of the game's designers, mentioned that Plato was fully engaged in the project, though she did acknowledge it was a step down from network TV.
And the significance here goes way beyond just her participation. Night Trap was one of the first games to integrate full-motion video using actors, but it gained massive notoriety upon its release.
Oh, the controversy was fierce. It was accused of promoting violence against women and overt sexuality, which led to this widespread moral panic and eventually a congressional hearing.
Yeah.
This furor, coupled with the contemporary controversy around Mortal Kombat, was the direct catalyst for the creation of the Entertainment Software Rating Board, the ESRB.
So she inadvertently helped create the video game rating system.
In a way, yes. Here she was, years after her sitcom peak, playing a leading role in a production that inadvertently catalyzed the entire video game industry's self-regulation system. It's a very unlikely footnote in the history of media.
It speaks volumes that her greatest impact in the 1990s was through a controversial, low-budget, innovative video game rather than mainstream Hollywood films.
Yeah.
Her career was just a series of extreme, high-profile gambles, and none of them managed to pull her out of the growing personal and financial hole she was in.
And the sources now take us into that period of catastrophic personal collapse in the late 80s and early 90s. This is where the lack of those life skills she mentioned really manifests in the most devastating fashion.
The personal losses, they just piled up in early 1988. It created this environment of profound vulnerability.
It really did. She separated from her husband, Lanny Lambert, and in the very same week, her mother, Kay Plato, died of scleroderma.
Losing her mother. I mean, she had been her sole parent and manager since she was a child. That severed her last remaining foundational support structure.
Exactly. And in that state of grief and extreme instability, she made a decision that sealed her financial fate. She signed over power of attorney to an accountant.
And that accountant vanished.
Vanished with the vast majority of her money. The financial betrayal was absolute. She was left with less than $150,000.
Which, to put that into perspective, the source's estimate would be equivalent to about $410,232 today. Which is not poverty, but it's a pittance compared to the millions a successful sitcom star should have amassed.
And crucially, she later claimed this accountant, who was never found or prosecuted, had stolen over $11 million from other clients as well.
This event is the perfect, tragic culmination of that plastic bubble upbringing. She was trained to perform, to be disciplined, but she utterly failed in protecting herself from financial predation because she lacked the necessary life skills and cynicism to navigate adult professional relationships without her mother's oversight.
The loss of her earnings meant the loss of her identity, her security.
And that financial devastation was quickly followed by the emotional devastation of losing her son. In March 1990, during her divorce, she lost custody of Tyler to his father, Lanny Lambert.
She was only granted visitation rights. This cut directly at that deep-seated fear of isolation she had articulated to Conrad Bain years earlier, the fear of being alone.
She had tried to create an anchor with her son, and now that anchor was largely removed.
And the sources detail her, and the incident is just legendary in the history of troubled celebrity scandals because of how quickly and absurdly it imploded.
She demanded money while brandishing a pellet gun.
A pellet gun. And the clerk, understandably, recognized her instantly. He called 911 and delivered one of the most famous reports in celebrity crime history. He said, "I've just been robbed by the girl who played Kimberly on Diff'rent Strokes."
That quote just perfectly encapsulates the sheer impossibility of her situation. She couldn't even commit a small, desperate crime anonymously.
No, and the theft itself was minuscule, only $164, which the sources indicate is about $387 in today's money.
And the arrest was immediate and almost self-inflicted. Approximately 15 minutes after leaving the store, she came back.
She returned to the scene of the crime and was arrested. The sheer panic and disorganization of the act suggests a moment of profound psychological crisis rather than a calculated crime.
Entertainer Wayne Newton, in a gesture of sympathy, posted her $13,000 bail. For the robbery, she received a sentence of 5 years probation.
But that downward cycle of addiction continued, making adherence to probation nearly impossible. Her inability to maintain sobriety led to her second arrest shortly thereafter, in January of 1992.
What was this one for?
This time she was arrested for forging a prescription for diazepam.
So a clear violation of her probation.
A very clear violation. She was incarcerated, serving 30 days in jail, and immediately upon release, the sources indicate she entered a drug rehabilitation program, signaling the seriousness of her addiction struggles even after the devastating public humiliation of the robbery.
And throughout all this legal and financial turbulence, her personal relationships remained unstable. The sources mention brief engagements, including one to a filmmaker named Fred Potts.
And later, she married an actor, Scott Adkins, also known as Scotty Gelt, in 1996, but that marriage was annulled after only 1 month.
So at the time of her death, she was engaged to Robert Menchaca, the man who was traveling with her.
Right. It just highlights this recurring theme of seeking connection and stability that perpetually eluded her.
The narrative just accelerates dramatically as we move into May 1999. The events of her final 48 hours are intensely documented and highly contentious. And they begin with her return to the national spotlight, albeit a controversial one. On May 7th, 1999, Dana Plato appeared on The Howard Stern Show.
And this interview was a flashpoint. It was a live public confrontation between her past celebrity and her current brutal reality. She was surprisingly open, discussing her financial problems, the devastating theft by the accountant, her past legal troubles.
And she claimed to be a recovering addict.
She did. She insisted she had been completely sober for over 10 years, stating she was only using prescribed painkillers following a wisdom tooth extraction.
But the environment of that show it was immediately hostile and deeply damaging. Many of the callers openly insulted her, mercilessly questioning her claims of sobriety and financial management.
And this public psychological pressure, it clearly provoked her anger. She reacted defensively, defiantly offering to take a drug test right there on the air to prove her sobriety.
The dynamic of that conversation was chaotic and, given the outcome, deeply disturbing. While some callers and Stern himself offered a semblance of defense, Stern also made these highly controversial statements.
Like referring to himself as an enabler.
And making the extraordinarily crass move of sarcastically offering her drugs on air. This interaction was just a televised humiliation, a former idol being interrogated and insulted by the very public that once adored her.
It was. And though she gave a hair sample for the proposed drug test during the interview, the sources add a final, strange note. Stern later claimed that after the interview concluded, she asked for the hair sample that had been cut for the test to be returned to her.
So regardless of the outcome of that test, the emotional toll of that appearance was immediate and profound.
It was. The very next day, May 8th, 1999, she died. Plato and Menchaca were traveling back to California and had stopped in Moore, Oklahoma at the home of Menchaca's mother for a Mother's Day visit.
She reported feeling unwell that day and went to lie down in the Winnebago RV that was parked outside. And it was there that she ingested a combination of prescription medications.
Specifically, she took multiple doses of 2 different drugs. The first was hydrocodone-acetaminophen, commonly known by the brand name Lortab, which is a powerful opioid painkiller.
Okay.
The second was the muscle relaxant carisoprodol, commonly known as soma.
And we have to pause here to examine this specific drug combination because the sources are very clear about the extreme danger involved.
Extremely. The combination of an opioid painkiller like hydrocodone and a central nervous system depressant like carisoprodol is incredibly hazardous.
Why is that?
When these two substances are taken together, even in therapeutic doses, the drug interaction is severe. It results in the synergistic depression of the central nervous system.
Meaning they amplify each other.
Exactly. The source material warns explicitly that this cocktail dramatically increases the risk of profound sedation, severe respiratory distress, coma, and rapid death. And for an individual with a history of substance abuse, the risk is exponentially compounded.
Menchaca and his family discovered she had died in her sleep inside the RV. She was only 34 years old.
The initial assumption was naturally an accidental overdose. However, following the toxicology report and further investigation, the medical examiner ultimately ruled her death a suicide.
And this determination was based on her extensive, documented history of substance abuse and, crucially, past suicidal gestures known to the authorities.
Right, and the context of the deeply upsetting and public stern interview the previous day also factored into the perception of her mental state at the time.
But the ruling was contested, wasn't it, by those closest to her? It highlights the ambiguity that often surrounds these kinds of drug-related deaths.
It was. Her former co-star, Todd Bridges, publicly disagreed with the medical examiner's finding.
What did he say?
Bridges argued that Plato had consumed the fatal combination of drugs in an ambiguous amount, with the intention simply to fall asleep. He suggested she was seeking deep rest to escape the intense humiliation and stress of the day before, rather than intending to take her own life.
So, regardless of the legal finality of the suicide ruling, the pain and despair that led to her consuming that toxic cocktail, that remains the central, devastating fact of her final hours.
It does. Her body was later cremated and her ashes were scattered over the Pacific Ocean.
Dana Plato's death, tragically, was not an isolated event. It instantly propelled her to the center of this profound national debate surrounding the fate of troubled child stars.
Her story, coupled with the highly publicized struggles of her Diff'rent Strokes co-stars, Todd Bridges and Gary Coleman, it solidified the media narrative known as the curse of Diff'rent Strokes.
Right. Their combined difficulties became this stark illustration of the systemic failures of the Hollywood machine to protect and prepare young performers for life after fame.
Her death elevated her from a struggling actress to a cautionary tale about the unique psychological and financial vulnerabilities of child performers.
And her life after the show became the subject of intense media focus, reflecting the public's sort of morbid fascination with the destruction of youthful innocence. In 2000, just a year after her death, Fox broadcast a television movie called After Diff'rent Strokes, When the Laughter Stopped.
And that program specifically detailed her trajectory following the sitcom's cancellation and her final fatal day.
And then years later, in 2006, NBC revisited the narrative with Behind the Camera, the unauthorized story of Diff'rent Strokes.
Right, and the sources highlight a really profoundly moving moment at the conclusion of that film, where Bridges and Coleman are shown standing near Plato's grave, acknowledging the shared path of hardship and the tragic circumstances that bound them together beyond the sitcom set.
And most tragically, the generational cycle of pain did not end with Dana Plato's death. We have to address the information regarding the second tragedy involving her son, Tyler Edward Lambert.
This is perhaps the most devastating chapter of the entire story. Tyler Edward Lambert died by suicide on May 6, 2010.
He was 25 years old.
25. The cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head, and this occurred just 2 days before what would have been the 11th anniversary of his mother's death.
Sources close to Tyler confirmed that he had struggled profoundly to process and cope with his mother's death and the massive public scrutiny surrounding it.
They explicitly stated that the Mother's Day holiday in particular was always an extremely difficult and painful time for him, suggesting that the public tragedy of his mother created a legacy of trauma that he was ultimately unable to escape.
The sources, by linking these two deaths, they really emphasize the intense, long-lasting consequences of early trauma, addiction, and public tragedy.
It speaks to how the emotional and psychological environment created by early fame and collapse can just haunt the next generation.
Despite the immense difficulties and the highly publicized downfall, the sources do confirm that those who knew Dana Plato well still held on to the memory of the woman beneath the crisis.
Yeah, Todd Bridges, who shared so many unique challenges with her, he offered a powerful and sympathetic remembrance on Twitter on what would have been her 55th birthday, November 7, 2019.
The tribute read, "You were the one person I could always talk to. You were one of my best friends. I will never forget you and love you forever. Happy birthday, Dana Plato, R.I.P. You are free, my friend."
It's a compassionate final word. It acknowledges the deep bonds forged under the extreme pressure of child stardom and the genuine connection she was always seeking.
So what we've analyzed across these sources is the highly detailed, complex narrative of Dana Plato's life.
Mm-hmm.
A life built in a plastic bubble, catapulted into instant celebrity, then left completely exposed when the financial and family infrastructure dissolved. The journey from teen idol to video store robber to the final fatal consumption of pharmaceuticals, it highlights a series of systemic failures.
This is more than a cautionary tale. It is an analytical look at the overwhelming pressures placed on young performers. It shows what happens when the very mechanism that built the star, that intense focus, that isolation from real life, leaves them catastrophically unprepared for adult reality, for financial management, and for navigating their own mental health crises without income or genuine guidance.
It forces us to reflect on the economic and psychological vulnerability of child actors, especially as they try to transition into adulthood after that initial wave of fame passes.
Oh.
Her mother's effort to keep her in that plastic bubble, it might have ensured her success as Kimberly Drummond, but it unintentionally created a perfect storm. It prepared her for the massive performance demands of celebrity while leaving her completely defenseless against the harsh realities of being an adult, without the income, the management, or the life skills to sustain herself.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening.